Welcome everybody to the game analysis of game number 10 of the World Chess Championship 2018, and today we had Fabiano Caruana, the challenger with the white pieces, against current world champion, reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen. So let's see what is happening. Once again, as in game 8, we are seeing the open Sicilian, and you know what that means. We're in for an interesting game. And once again they go for the Sveshnikov variation here, knight d to b5, d6, and this slightly rare move 7 knight to d5. Knight takes, pawn takes. So far we are following the game 8, and Caruana is the first to deviate in this position. He plays a new move. In game 8 he played bishop d2, and in fact there's 6 other moves in this position which have been played. King h1 is the main move, a5, and so on. But Caruana plays an 8th move, a move that has never been seen before. The move b2 to b4, which must have come as a surprise to Carlsen. And very good practical decision by Team Caruana here, finding a completely new move, unusual move, and then just studying this move quite deeply. Of course, this move isn't anything spectacular, it's just a move. But something that Carlsen did not check, and now Caruana already had analyzed and studied this position and the ensuing variations in quite some detail, whereas Carlsen did not. And this is what it's all about. You want to have that advantage where you know more about the position than your opponent, and it's not about getting an advantage. Getting an advantage is a dream. A dream in World Championship matches. You just want to make your opponent uncomfortable. So black went a6, now knight to a3, and Carlsen goes a5 right away. He could also play moves such as b6 to stop a5 from happening, because then black could simply take. But a5 also has its merit. Black wants to destroy the white pawn structure on the queen side. And in general, maybe I should say a few words about this move b4 in the first place. Why did white do this? Well, in general in this position you see that white has a majority of pawns here on the queen side. That means he will play on that side of the board, whereas black has the majority on the king side, which means he will play there and possibly create an attack against the white king. So this is why b4 makes a lot of sense. White wants to push forward his pawns and open up files and create play there. Now a5, here white doesn't want to push forward. That would leave him with a weakened square on c5 and no later option to break through. You can see the only break would be c4, c5, and this is very difficult to achieve, especially if black plays a move like b6. So this is not something you want to do, and instead Caruana took on a5. Rook takes, knight c4 hits the rook retreats to a8, and bishop e3. White develops. Black goes for a typical move here, f5, and white plays a5, f4. This also makes sense. Black pushes forward and white goes bishop b6, hitting the queen. But black is not too unhappy to play queen e8, because he wants to bring the queen to the king side anyway to create threats later on against the white king. And in this position actually white is a bit better, but it's quite difficult, and the position in general is incredibly complex and exciting because we have this imbalance. White wants to get something going on the queen side, and black wants to pretty much checkmate the white king. Here Caruana played a logical move, the move rook a3. The rook is well placed on the third rank to help defend if needed, and this makes just a lot of sense. But better was to move rook e1, and the idea is quite deep. If black plays like he did in the game, queen g6, white can now play bishop c7. And we see his position in a moment, just with the rook on a3 and the other rook on f1. And the point is here that black cannot go forward with e4. This is why the rook is better placed on e1, because now white has this move, bishop h5, and the queen is overextended. If it defends the pawn on e4, let's say goes to f5, then this guy is hanging, and that would be bad news for black. And if the queen goes somewhere else, well, queen to g5, then the pawn on e4 is hanging. Note that here bishop takes d6 would not be a good idea, because these kind of ideas, f3 hitting g2, hitting the bishop. So Rook takes e4 though, takes this out of the position, and then white is just winning here. There's no attack and black has lost a crucial pawn. So this is the point of rook e1. In this position, black shouldn't go e4, he should play something else like knight c5, but now white can also go bishop h5 and knight to b6, let's say. Rook a6, grab the bishop on c8, which is a very important minor piece for the black attacking prospects, and this position seems to be a bit better for white. Rook e1, the prophylactical move, and not too easy to find, obviously. Rook a3, queen to g6, bishop c7. As mentioned, we reach this position. Bishop c7 makes a lot of sense, because now if black moves this knight, let's say to f6 or c5, white can always bring the knight to b6 with tempo. So black is kind of stuck with his minor pieces there on the queen side, and also obviously white is eyeing this pawn on d6. Black went e4 now. This makes sense, immediately creating the threat of f3, and white avoids that by going king to h1. b5, strong move here by Carlsen. You're not focusing only on the queen side here as black, but, excuse me, you might think that black is only looking at the king side, but then suddenly he switches gears and starts the action on the queen side. Remarkable move. The point is that if white takes his pawn en passant, then black goes rook takes a3, knight takes, and pushes forward. And you see, suddenly without this defending rook on the third rank, the black pieces are swarming out and white is under a lot of pressure here. All black pieces are coming to life, whereas the white pieces are far away, at least two of them, and the black attack will be quite dangerous. So Caruana recognized that and he avoided that by going knight to b6. The knights come off, white takes with the bishop. Also that makes sense to have the bishop on b6 where it's defending better than on c7. And here Carlsen made a mistake. He went queen to g5. And the commentators were saying, Carlsen's going for the kill. Interesting move to prepare the rook swing over the 6th rank. But it abandons this pawn on b5, and Caruana could have taken it. Before we see that though, let's see what Carlsen should have done instead. A move like b4, first of all, would have been a good idea. Rook goes to b3, and now improve the position of the bishop. Yes, white can also take the pawn here, but he loses some time. Black gets his pieces out and puts the bishop on e5, still has ideas such as f3. And black has sufficient compensation for the pawn here. Quite a complex position. White probably goes f3. Black gets this protected pass pawn on e3. Who knows what's happening, but it seems to be dynamically balanced. After queen g5, white actually can get a pretty clear advantage if he takes the pawn on b5. But that's more easier said than done, obviously for me, especially with the aid of the computer. And Caruana did not do this. He missed his chance. He played g3 to defend his king. Bishop takes b5. Rook f6 was probably the move that worried Caruana. Rook g6 or rook h6 is in the position, but white can calmly play rook e1, hit this pawn on e4, and prepare to bring the bishop back to f1. Let's say rook g6, bishop f1. And this is also something you can remember, this kind of setup. Bishop on f1 defends the pawn on g2, and white is pretty solid. Now, if black goes f3, white just goes g3, and again, white is defending the important pawns, and he's attacking this guy. After bishop f5, rook a4, white can even think about sacrificing exchange, since once he has fought off the attack by black, suddenly he's left with this strong passer on the a file. So this promised white an advantage. But obviously not easy to go for that. You have to be quite sure you're not getting checkmated. And Caruana was not so sure, so he rather played g3, which is a more safe move. Now, Carlsen responded with b4, rook to b3, bishop to h3, rook to g1. White has to react here, and he still has to react. f3 is happening, bishop to f1, trading off that strongly placed bishop on h3. The bishops come off, and black said, okay, well, seems like I'm not going to checkmate here, so let me just take this pawn on d5. Rook takes b4. And now queen to e6. This is preparing here to play d5. And this is why Caruana played rook b5 already to take control over the 5th rank. And if now black goes d5, white could immediately attack this pawn of queen d1. This is why instead Carlsen played bishop d8. This has the intention to trade bishops and then play e3, which would be quite uncomfortable. So white goes queen e1 to stop that. Now the bishops come off and white has now his passer on the b file and on the 6th rank, and this is actually promising him enough play. The position is equal here. Black has a nice pawn chain in the center, and obviously the white king is also a little bit unsafe, but white has this passer on b6 and this gives him enough play and it is balanced. Rook a b8, queen to e3, queen c4, hitting both pawn and rook. Rook to b2, rook b7, rook to d1, and now queen e2, threatening the rook on d1, but Caruana just responds with rook e1. Here's a cute line, queen b3 check. First looks like it's winning the queen after c4. The queen has nowhere to go, but black has this counter of rook takes b6, and suddenly it's black who's winning after rook takes e2, f takes e2, black attacks the rook on d1, gets at least 2 rooks for the queen and will just win. One line that remained behind the curtains, but obviously something that I assume both players checked during the game. Rook e1 played, now we enter this rook endgame, black goes d5, and here an important move by Caruana h4 to give his king some space. If here white played c4, that would be a mistake because black can answer rook c8 and white cannot take on d5 because of the back rank checkmate. So this is why h4 is played, rook c8, and now white activates the rook, rook to a3, king f7. This was the 40th move, and Caruana played king h2, which is fine, but it seemed that while the position is equal, only black is pressing. So here Caruana could have also forced a draw right away with the move rook a7, rook b8, and now c4. Black has to take this pawn, otherwise white will push forward. And after it takes, there's rook c2. Black cannot take on b6 because of the pin, and after, let's say, king g8, there are massive exchanges. We enter this rook in game, and the players can agree to a draw. Doesn't matter here that black can win the pawn on f2, because this pawn will also not stay for too long on the board. But like I said, king h2 is not a mistake, just practically it would have been easier to go rook a7. King e6, now g4, opening the route for the king. Rook c6, white defends the pawn. King e5, king g3, h6, planning g5 to cut off the king, put him in a cage, so white stops that by going h5. And here Carlsen could have done any number of things, king d6, king e6, pretty much anything. He wanted to keep pushing king d4, but he missed something here, it seems. And suddenly, after rook b5, it's only white who's pushing. Rook b5, strong move by Caruana. White is going after his pawn on d5. Black now takes on c2, there's rook a5, and now black is already in some trouble here because he cannot defend the pawn on d5. Rook d7 would be answered by b7. So Carlsen decided, alright, I need to play this move and I need to retreat. King to e5, rook bb4, rook ab4, and white is preparing c4. Making use of this pin, so black steps out of it, goes king to e6 and c4 anyway. Now the pawns are exchanged and black takes on b6, white takes on e4, king goes to f7. We see not a lot of pawns left on the board. White will win this pawn on f3, but it's not enough to win the game because it's a rook in game and, well, just not enough material left here, all pawns on one side of the board. If white was able to keep the double rooks on the board, maybe he would still have some slight chances, but he's not able to. Whenever he takes on f3, pretty much there's a trade, or he just cannot avoid the trade of rooks here, and then it's a simple draw. So in the game, Caruana played rook f5 check, rook f6, takes, and king takes f3, king f7, king g3, and just offered a draw. There's absolutely nothing that white can try here. If these pawns were not on the board, white could at least try, but here there's really nothing to do. So Caruana just offered a draw, which was accepted. All right, so that means it's the 10th draw in a row. The score is 5-5, but at least today we were treated once again to a very exciting game because of this imbalance. White pushing on the queen side, black pushing on the king side, and Carlsen going for the mate, but Caruana defending. And in the end, actually Carlsen was a bit worse here, but didn't matter. There was just this one critical moment where Carlsen made a mistake with queen g5, but Caruana did not capitalize on it. But we shan't forget, that was an incredibly complex position. And to just grab a pawn there and say, all right, I'm going to defend, I'm going to be fine, this would have been a tough decision to make, and it's understandable that Caruana rather played it safe. So tomorrow there's a rest day, and then on Saturday there's game number 11, once again with Carlsen with the white pieces. And before we finish, I would like to point out that I'm doing a Black Friday sale with my new book, Carlsen vs. Caruana, Duel of Giants. So currently on Amazon and on Forward Chess, it's 25% off. So if you want to, you are invited to check that out. All right, I see you for the next game. Until then, bye-bye.